The Galactic Terror database lists human psychological manipulation as weapons of terror. Part 1. Ambassador had worked in galactic security for 40 cycles, and he thought he had seen everything. His species, though, prided themselves on their ability to detect threats. Their antennae could sense chemical signatures of aggression from across a room. Their pheromone-based communication made lying physically impossible. So when his assistant rushed into his office on the council station with urgent news about humanity's membership application, expected the usual concerns about primitive weapons or aggressive tendencies. What he got instead made no sense at all. "Sir, the terror database has flagged 17 items in the human application," N said, her antennae quivering with distress. She was young, barely past her first molting, and still learning the intricacies of galactic security work. Pulled up the file on his display screen. The Galactic Terror database was exhaustive, compiled over thousands of years by hundreds of species. It every known weapon, from simple kinetic projectiles to reality-warping dimensional bombs. Species were rated on their danger level, and problematic technologies were flagged for review before council membership could be granted. He scanned through humanity's entries. Chemical weapons, nuclear fission, biological agents, all standard for a species at their technological level. Nothing that would prevent membership with proper treaties and oversight. But then he reached the flagged items, and his antennae went rigid with confusion. Gaslighting, he read aloud. Silent treatment, guilt-tripping, passive aggression, emotional blackmail. He looked it in. What are these, some kind of chemical compound? No, sir. They're classified as Class 7 psychological warfare techniques. The database projects casualty rates in the millions if deployed against most galactic species. Open the detailed file on gaslighting. The description made his head hurt. A manipulation technique where the perpetrator causes the victim to question their own memory, perception, and sanity. He read it 3 times and still didn't understand. How is this possible? Either something happened or it didn't. Memory can be faulty, yes, but questioning sanity. How would this work as a weapon? N pulled up another entry. This one is called the silent treatment. It says humans use it to punish others by refusing to acknowledge their existence while remaining physically present. The psychological damage can be severe, causing anxiety, self-doubt, and in extreme cases, complete mental breakdown in sensitive species. But that's just not talking, said. How is silence a weapon? There's more, sir. Look at this one, moving someone's belongings slightly to the left repeatedly. It's listed as a Class 5 psychological attack meant to induce paranoia and distrust of one's own senses. Stood up and paced his office. In all his years of security work, he had never encountered anything like this. The waged war with antimatter bombs, the had perfected biological plagues that could wipe out entire planets. The collective had weaponized black holes. These were threats he understood, but making someone doubt their memory by talking to them, attacking them with silence, it seemed absurd. And yet the terror database didn't flag things without cause. Its algorithms were sophisticated, drawing on psychological profiles of all known species. If it said these techniques were dangerous, there had to be a reason. Schedule a meeting with the human diplomatic envoy, said. I need to understand what we're dealing with. Director Sarah arrived at his office 2 days later. She was a middle-aged human woman with dark hair pulled back in a style that humans called a bun. Her face showed the lines that humans developed as they aged, something found oddly unsettling, simply molted into their next life stage. The idea of wearing your years on your skin seemed vulnerable somehow. Ambassador, it's a pleasure to meet you, Sarah said, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. Had learned about handshakes in his diplomatic training. He awkwardly grasped her hand and moved it up and down twice. Please sit, he said, gesturing to the chair designed for bipedal species. I need to discuss some concerns about humanity's membership application. Of course, I'm happy to address any issues. Sarah's face arranged itself into what humans called a smile, had studied human expressions, but he still found them difficult to read. So much meaning hidden in tiny muscle movements. The Terror database has flagged several items in your species profile, began carefully. Techniques listed as psychological warfare. I need you to explain what these are and how your species plans to ensure they won't be deployed against council members. Sarah's eyebrows rose. Psychological warfare. I'm not sure I understand. We've declared all our military capabilities. We have protocols for. This isn't about your military, interrupted. He pulled up the list on his display and turned it toward her. These items, gaslighting, silent treatment, guilt tripping, the database classifies them as Class 7 threats. Sarah leaned forward and read the list. Her expression shifted through several configurations that couldn't interpret. Then she made a sound, a short exhalation through her nose that his translator labeled as laughter. I'm sorry, she said, though her translator indicated amusement rather than apology in her tone. These aren't weapons, these are just things people do. Relationship problems mostly, bad communication, poor conflict resolution. The database disagrees, said stiffly. It projects millions of casualties if these techniques are deployed. Look, Ambassador, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Gaslighting is what happens in bad relationships when someone manipulates another person. It's terrible, yes, but it's not a military weapon. It's just something that unfortunately happens between people sometimes. Security AI, monitoring the conversation through his neural implant, suddenly flashed a warning in his visual field. Possible psychological manipulation DETECTED. Subject claiming terror weapon is harmless. Recommend caution. I see, said slowly. And these techniques, they're not part of your military training. No, of course not. Well, I suppose intelligence agencies might use some psychological tactics, but nothing like what you're describing. These are just interpersonal problems. Can you demonstrate what gaslighting is? Asked. Sarah hesitated. That's not really something I can demonstrate. It's a pattern of behavior over time. Someone makes you doubt your own memory or perception of reality. But how would they do that? Well, for example, they might deny saying something they clearly said. Or they tell you that you're remembering wrong, that you're too sensitive, that you're imagining things. Over time, you start to question yourself. Thought about this. In communication, pheromones made lying impossible. The chemical signatures were involuntary. The very concept of denying something you said was foreign to him. But there would be records, recordings, evidence. Sometimes there are, sometimes there aren't. And even when there are, a skilled manipulator can make you doubt the evidence. They tell you the recording is wrong, or you're interpreting it wrong, or you edited it somehow. But that's stopped. His security AI was flashing more warnings now. He felt confused, which was unusual for him. Brains were structured for clarity and logic. Sarah continued talking, explaining various human relationship dynamics. She mentioned something about her childhood, then talked about therapy, then circled back to diplomatic protocols. Tried to follow, but the conversation seemed to shift in ways he couldn't track. At one point, he referenced something Sarah had said 10 minutes earlier about human conflict resolution. She looked at him with a puzzled expression. I never said that, she said gently. You must be thinking of something else. No, you stopped. Had she said that? He had been having trouble following the conversation. Maybe he had misunderstood. His translator sometimes had issues with human idioms. Are you feeling all right, Ambassador? Sarah asked. You seem a bit confused. I'm fine, said, but he wasn't sure he was. He glanced at his recording system to check the conversation log, but Sarah was already talking again, and he lost his train of thought. They spoke for another 20 minutes. Sarah was pleasant and helpful, answering all his questions, but when she finally left, sat in his office feeling strangely unsettled. He had started the conversation with clear concerns, but now he wasn't sure what those concerns were. Sarah had explained everything perfectly reasonably. These weren't weapons, just interpersonal problems. Nothing to worry about. He was about to file a report clearing the flags when his security team burst through his door. "Sir, are you all right?" his head of security demanded. "We've been monitoring the conversation. The human deployed at least 6 Class 7 techniques during your discussion." "What? No, she was just explaining." "Sir, please review the recording." His security chief pulled up the conversation log. "At timestamp 8:42, you mentioned her earlier statement about conflict resolution. She's saying it. But here, at timestamp 2:17, she said exactly what you referenced." Watch the replay. His security chief was right. Sarah had said those exact words. And then she had it, calmly and with what appeared to be genuine confusion. And he had believed her. He had questioned his own memory even though he had been certain just moments before. "This is exactly what the technique described," his security chief said. "You experienced a Class 7 psychological attack, sir, and it worked. Within 10 minutes you were doubting your own perceptions." Felt something he rarely experienced, fear, not of physical harm but of something more insidious. Sarah hadn't threatened him. She hadn't even seemed hostile. She had been friendly, professional, helpful, and yet she had manipulated his sense of reality without him even noticing. If one human could do this to a trained security officer in a single conversation, what could they do to the entire Galactic Council? "Call an emergency session," said quietly. "The Council needs to know what we're dealing with." His security chief nodded and left, sat alone in his office, replaying the conversation again and again. Every time he watched it, he saw more. The subtle redirects when he asked difficult questions. The way Sarah had made him feel foolish for being concerned. The gentle implications that he was confused or tired or not understanding correctly. And the worst part, even knowing what she had done, even seeing the evidence, part of him still wanted to believe her explanation. Still wanted to think this was all a misunderstanding. That, realized with growing horror, was exactly how the weapon worked. Part 2. The emergency council session convened in the Grand Chamber, a massive spherical room designed to accommodate the diverse physical forms of member species. Stood in the section, his prepared evidence displayed on holographic screens around him. Representatives from 47 species floated, stood, or settled into their designated areas, all waiting to hear why humanity's membership application required an emergency review. Chancellor, an ancient being from a species that resembled crystalline structures more than flesh, called the session to order. Her voice resonated through the chamber, translated simultaneously into every known language. "Ambassador has brought serious concerns about the human application," she announced. "The floor is yours, Ambassador." Activated his presentation. The holographic displays showed excerpts from humanity's own literature, military strategy texts, psychology journals, self-help books with titles like Getting What You Want and How to Win Friends and Influence People, academic papers on manipulation tactics, psychological abuse, and something called dark psychology. "The humans have documented these techniques themselves," explained. "Thousands upon thousands of written works describing methods of psychological manipulation. They study it. They teach it. They write guidebooks about it." A representative from the Hive Mind Collective, a single speaker for billions of linked consciousnesses, raised a concern. Perhaps these are defensive studies, ways to recognize and protect against such tactics. "That's what I thought," said, "until I experienced one firsthand." He played the recording of his conversation with Sarah, highlighting the moment she her own statement. "I'm a trained security officer. I knew to be cautious. And yet within minutes she had me doubting my own memory." The chamber erupted in discussion. Some representatives dismissed the concern. Others demanded humanity's application be immediately rejected. Chancellor called for order. "We will establish a tribunal," she declared. "Humanity will be given the opportunity to defend themselves and explain these concerns. Until then, their membership application is frozen." 3 days later, the tribunal convened. Humanity sent a defense team led by Doctor, a psychologist, and Commander Lisa Torres, a military strategist. The prosecution was handled by a team of legal experts from species across the galaxy. Doctor began humanity's defense calmly. He was an older human with gray hair and a gentle manner that immediately put some of the tribunal members at ease. Noted this reaction with suspicion. Was this manipulation too? "Honorable tribunal members," Doctor said, "I believe there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about human psychology. What you see as weapons are actually survival tools that evolved over millions of years." He displayed images of early humans living in small groups on Earth. Humans evolved in competitive social environments. We had to cooperate with our group while competing with others. This required complex social intelligence, the ability to understand what others think, predict their behavior, and sometimes deceive them. "You admit to deception," the prosecution's lead attorney declared. "I admit that humans, like many intelligent species, develop the capacity for deception," Doctor replied. "But we also develop the ability to detect deception. It's an evolutionary arms race. As we got better at lying, we got better at catching lies. These skills were necessary for survival." He brought up more data. Human children develop what we call theory of mind around age 4. They learn that other people have thoughts and beliefs different from their own. They learn that someone can believe something false. This is a crucial developmental milestone. A member of the crystalline species spoke up, their voice like chiming bells. "You teach deception to your children." "We teach them that people can be wrong," Doctor corrected. "That different people see the world differently. That someone's belief doesn't always match reality. This isn't its basic social cognition." "Let's demonstrate that these techniques are harmless," Commander Torres interjected. She was a sharp-featured woman with military bearing. "We can show you exactly what these tactics look like and why they're not the threat you think they are." The tribunal agreed. They selected volunteers from different species to participate in demonstrations. Commander Torres started with something called good cop, bad cop. She explained that it was a basic interrogation technique where two questioners alternated between aggressive and friendly approaches. It's meant to build rapport with a subject by offering relief from stress. She demonstrated on a crystalline volunteer, playing the bad cop role first. She raised her voice, made aggressive gestures, and accused the crystalline of hiding information. The crystalline structure began to vibrate with stress. When Commander Tor's assistant came in playing the good cop, offering sympathy and understanding, the crystalline literally shattered, breaking into dozens of pieces in a defensive panic response. Medical teams rushed in to help reassemble the crystalline volunteer. The demonstration was not going well. "Perhaps something gentler," Doctor suggested quickly. He turned to a representative from the logician species, beings known for their perfect rational thinking. "Let me demonstrate reverse psychology. It's when you suggest someone do the opposite of what you want them to do, knowing they'll resist and do what you actually wanted." He pointed to a button on the table. "Whatever you do, don't push that button." The logician stared at the button, then at Doctor, then back at the button. "You stated I should not push the button," the logician said slowly. "That's right, definitely don't push it. But your tone and body language suggest you want me to push it." "No, I'm telling you not to. But the purpose of telling me not to is to make me want to push it. I'm simply asking you not to push the button." The logician's optical sensors flickered. "If you want me to push it, you should say so. If you don't want me to push it, your statement is logical. But if your statement is designed to produce the opposite effect, then it's illogical, which means you're not communicating efficiently, which violates the principle of rational discourse, which means the logician's processors locked up. They stood frozen, trapped in a logical paradox. Their companions had to carry them out for a system reset. Perhaps we should stop the demonstrations, Chancellor suggested. Doctor looked deflated. I'm trying to show you these aren't weapons. They're just how humans communicate. But I see now that what's normal for us is genuinely harmful to species who evolved differently. That's exactly the problem. You've normalized these tactics so thoroughly that you don't even see them as attacks. Your own statistics show millions of humans seek therapy every year to recover from psychological manipulation. You have entire support groups for victims of narcissistic abuse, emotional manipulation, and toxic relationships. This isn't about military weapons. You do this to each other constantly. The tribunal chamber fell silent. Doctor had no response to that. During the recess, found himself reviewing human entertainment media. His research had led him down a strange path. Humans watched shows about con artists for fun. They enjoyed stories about political intrigue and backstabbing. Their most popular dramas were about people lying to and manipulating each other. He compiled clips and brought them to the tribunal when they reconvened. I want to show you something disturbing, he said. Humans have made psychological manipulation into entertainment. He played a scene from a show about a con artist tricking people out of money. The human audience was meant to root for the con artist. He showed a political drama where characters betrayed each other with words and subtle implications. He played a romantic comedy where the main characters played mind games with each other. They watch this for pleasure, said. They have weaponized psychological manipulation so completely that it's become recreational. The tribunal members looked at each other in growing alarm. Even Doctor seemed unsure how to defend this. I request permission to call one more witness, Sarah said from the back of the chamber. She had been sitting quietly through the proceedings. Someone who can provide context that I think we're missing. Chancellor considered. Very well, but this is your last opportunity. Sarah brought forward an elderly human woman, her hair white and her face deeply lined with age. She moved slowly but with dignity. This is Doctor, Sarah said. She's a specialist in elder care and has spent 50 years studying how humans recover from psychological trauma. Doctor settled into the witness area. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. I've listened to these proceedings with great interest, she began, and I think everyone is missing something important. Yes, humans have these capacities. Yes, some humans use them to hurt others, but we've also developed something else, defenses. She brought up her own presentation, filled with data that hadn't seen before. We have therapy. We have emotional intelligence training. We teach people how to set boundaries, how to recognize manipulation, how to protect themselves. We have cultural wisdom about these things. Phrases like actions speak louder than words, and if someone shows you who they are, believe them. We've created entire fields of study dedicated to helping people recognize and resist manipulation. She showed statistics about therapy outcomes, about domestic abuse survivor programs, about mental health education in human schools. Every generation, we get better at this, Doctor continued. We recognize the patterns faster. We teach our children to trust themselves. We've built systems to help victims recover. Yes, humans can manipulate each other, but we've also built a civilization dedicated to helping people heal from it and prevent it. She paused, looking around the chamber at the various alien species. You're afraid of what we can do. That's understandable. But you should also see what we've done to fight against it. We haven't just weaponized manipulation. We've declared war on it within our own society. Found himself listening closely. This was the first thing any human had said that made sense to him. not denying the danger, but acknowledging it and showing how they'd work to counter it. "How effective are these defenses?" Chancellor asked. "They're not perfect," Doctor admitted. "People still get hurt. But our statistics show that societies with better mental health education, stronger support systems, and more awareness of these issues have significantly better outcomes. We're getting better at protecting each other." The tribunal session ended with no clear resolution. Returned to his office, his mind churning with everything he'd learned. Humanity wasn't denying their capabilities. They were admitting to them and showing how they'd tried to manage the damage. But was that enough? Could the Council trust a species that had normalized psychological warfare to the point of making it entertainment? He didn't have an answer yet. Part 3. The tribunal deliberations stretched across 3 days. Barely slept during that time, spending his nights reviewing testimony and evidence. His security team had compiled an extensive report on human psychological capabilities, and the more he read, the more complex the picture became. While waiting for the verdict, the Council had arranged cultural exchange programs between humans and various alien species. The idea was to help everyone better understand each other. Thought it was optimistic at best and dangerous at worst, but he attended anyway. The workshop on human emotional intelligence was chaos from the start. A delegate learned that humans could synthesize pheromone in laboratories. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community. Their entire civilization was built on the assumption that pheromone communication was impossible to fake. Chemical honesty was the foundation of their society. Learning that humans could manufacture false chemical signals devastated them. "Our whole culture is based on truth," the delegate said, her antennae drooping in distress. "If pheromones can be faked, then everything we believe about each other could be a lie." The hive mind representative had a different crisis. When Doctor explained the human concept of internal conflict, wanting two different things at the same time, having one part of yourself disagree with another part, the hive struggled to process it. "But you are one being," the hive speaker said, confused. "How can one being want contradictory things?" "It happens all the time," Doctor explained. "You might want to eat a cookie but also want to lose weight. You might want to quit your job but also need the money. Part of you wants one thing, part of you wants another." The hive speaker was silent for a long moment. "We are millions of individuals in one consciousness. We understand different voices, but we always reach consensus. The idea that a single mind could be divided against itself is," they paused, searching for words, "terrifying." The crystalline species representative asked about cognitive dissonance, the discomfort humans felt when holding contradictory beliefs simultaneously. "You can believe two opposite things at once?" they asked. "Not comfortably," Doctor said. "It causes psychological stress. But yes, humans do it all the time. We might believe we're good people while doing something we know is wrong. We rationalize it, make excuses, or just live with the discomfort. That violates the principle of logical consistency," the crystalline said flatly. "It shouldn't be possible." "And yet we do it," Doctor replied with a shrug. Despite the rocky start, the workshops continued. Slowly, awkwardly, the different species began to understand each other better. The aliens learned about human complexity. The humans learned about the alien perspectives that made human behavior seem so threatening. Then came the incident that changed everything. It happened during a diplomatic dinner on the 5th day. The tribunal hadn't reached a verdict yet, and tensions were high. A young logician diplomat, eager to practice what he'd learned about human culture, approached Ambassador after his speech about Council security protocols. "That was interesting," the logician said carefully, using a word he'd learned from humans. In logician culture, interesting was a precise term meaning intellectually stimulating and worthy of further analysis. It was a genuine compliment. but now educated in human subtext and the ways humans used words to mask their true feelings, interpreted it the way a human would. When a human said something was interesting, it often meant they found it boring but were too polite to say so. Santini stiffened with offense. "You found my speech inadequate." The logician looked confused. "No, I found it interesting, rich with data points and logical structure." "You don't have to pretend to be polite," said coldly. "I understand human subtext now. Interesting means you didn't like it but won't say so directly." "That is not what I meant." "It's fine," said, using another word he'd learned. In human speech, fine often meant the opposite of fine. The logician's optical sensors flickered with confusion. "I do not understand. I was attempting to offer sincere praise using human linguistic conventions." Sarah, who had been watching nearby, quickly intervened. "Ambassador, I think there's been a misunderstanding. The logician was using the word in its literal sense, not the human implied sense." Felt his antennae droop with embarrassment. He'd been so focused on understanding human manipulation that he'd started seeing it everywhere, even where it didn't exist. "I apologize," he said to the logician. "I misread your intent." Sarah smiled. A genuine smile this time was fairly certain. "This is actually a perfect teaching moment. Context matters. The same words carry different weights in different cultures. What's manipulation in one context is simple communication in another." The incident was small, but it rippled through the diplomatic community. Everyone had been so focused on human psychology as a threat that they'd forgotten the most basic diplomatic principle. Misunderstanding could happen anywhere, between any species. 3 days later, the tribunal reconvened for the final verdict. Chancellor called the chamber to order, and the various species representatives settled into their places. Felt uncharacteristically nervous. "This tribunal has reviewed extensive evidence regarding humanity's psychological capabilities," Chancellor began. "We have heard testimony from experts, witnessed demonstrations, and studied human culture. The question before us is whether humanity poses a psychological threat to the Galactic Council and its member species." She paused, her crystalline structure refracting light in complex patterns. "The tribunal acknowledges that humans possess sophisticated psychological manipulation capabilities. This is not in dispute. However, we must also acknowledge several mitigating factors." She brought up data on the holographic displays. "First, humanity has developed internal safeguards and healing systems to address psychological harm. Their therapeutic practices, education systems, and social support structures demonstrate an active effort to combat manipulation within their own society. Second, all species possess capabilities they choose not to use. They could deploy antimatter weapons. They could release biological plagues. They could synthesize deadly pheromones. The crystalline could shatter every silicon-based computer in the galaxy through resonance attacks. But we don't, because civilization requires restraint. Third, and perhaps most importantly, our recent cultural exchanges have demonstrated that human psychological complexity is not inherently hostile. It evolved in response to their specific evolutionary pressures, just as our own capabilities evolved in response to ours. Listened carefully. He had spent 3 days in deliberation with the other tribunal members, and the debate had been intense. Some wanted to reject humanity outright. Others argued for complete acceptance. In the end, they'd reached a compromise. "The tribunal's verdict is as follows," Chancellor announced. "Humanity is granted provisional council membership, subject to the following conditions." She listed them clearly. First, humanity would work with the Council to establish a galactic psychological warfare treaty, prohibiting the deployment of Class 7 manipulation tactics in interstellar relations. Second, human diplomats would provide training to other species on recognizing and defending against psychological manipulation. Third, humanity would submit to regular monitoring of their diplomatic communications for the first 10 cycles of membership. The vote was not unanimous, Chancellor acknowledged, but it was decisive. 32 species voted in favor, 15 against. She turned to look directly at Section. Ambassador, as the primary investigator in this matter, you have been asked to provide a statement explaining your vote. Stood his antennae steady. He had rehearsed this moment. I voted in favor of humanity's membership, he said clearly. Not because I believe the risks are insignificant, but because I believe isolation is more dangerous than integration. He brought up his own presentation. We fear what humans can do with words because we have never needed to defend against such attacks, but perhaps that is our weakness, not their fault. The universe is vast, and we will encounter many species with capabilities that challenge us. If we reject everyone who makes us uncomfortable, we will remain stagnant and vulnerable. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Humans have spent learning to navigate their own psychological complexity. They've hurt each other, yes, but they've also developed wisdom about how to recognize manipulation, how to heal from it, and how to build healthier relationships. If we are to grow as a galactic community, we must learn not just to navigate the stars, but to navigate each other's minds. The chamber was silent. Then, slowly, species representatives began signaling their agreement through their various means of communication. The verdict is final, Chancellor declared. Welcome to the Galactic Council, humanity. 6 months later, the Council had been transformed in ways no one had predicted. Diplomatic training now included mandatory modules on psychological literacy. All species learned about reading between the lines, recognizing passive aggression, and the infamous lesson on when fine doesn't mean fine. Some species struggled with the concepts. The logicians needed extensive training on metaphor and implication. They had to learn that not everyone communicated with chemical honesty. The hive minds grappled with the idea of individual deception within a larger group. But others thrived. The who communicated through bioluminescent patterns discovered they'd been using their own forms of subtle manipulation for generations without realizing it. They found that understanding human psychology helped them better comprehend the species they'd been trying to negotiate with for centuries. Sat in his office, reviewing the latest diplomatic reports. The council was messier now, more complicated. Negotiations took longer because everyone was more careful about subtext and hidden meanings, but they were also more honest about those complications. His door chimed. "Come in," he called. Sarah entered, carrying 2 cups of something steaming. "I brought coffee," she said. "Thought you might need it. I heard the delegation is giving you trouble." Accepted the cup gratefully. He developed a taste for coffee, though it did strange things to his antennae. "They're not giving me trouble, they keep saying their demands are reasonable, but then asking for concessions that seem unreasonable. I can't tell if they're negotiating or manipulating." Sarah sat down across from him. "Probably both. That's kind of how negotiation works." "Is it always this complicated with humans?" "Usually more so," Sarah admitted. "You're getting the version because we're trying to be on our best behavior." Made a sound that was the equivalent of laughter. 6 months ago, that statement would have terrified him. Now it just seemed like Sarah being honest. "The terror database still lists your psychological techniques," he said, "but they've been reclassified." "Oh, to what?" "Advanced social navigation systems. Approach with caution and cultural sensitivity training." Sarah laughed. "That's quite a mouthful." "There's a footnote too," added. He pulled it up on his screen. It says, "Humans have survived of doing this to each other. They might be tougher than they look." "I like that," Sarah said. "Acknowledges the difficulty without making us sound like monsters." "There's one more warning," said. "It was added by the delegation specifically. Would you like to hear it?" "Should I be worried?" "Perhaps," read from the screen. Under no circumstances should any species attempt to use the silent treatment on a human who has done something wrong. They invented it. They're better at it than you. You will lose. Sarah burst out laughing, a genuine, uncontrolled sound that made antennae vibrate in sympathy. "That's actually good advice," she said when she caught her breath. "We've had thousands of years to perfect the art of pointed silence." They sat together drinking coffee, a human and a representatives of species who had almost ended up on opposite sides of a galactic conflict. The silence between them was comfortable now. Not a weapon, not manipulation, just two people who had learned to understand each other, despite coming from worlds so different they might as well have been in different universes. Outside the window, ships from dozens of species docked at the council.